Happy March Madness Day. You know, Vandy's next head coach is playing in the tournament. I believe that. Who will it be? Well, we're going to take a look at two candidates. So buckle up and let's go.
You are Locked On Vandy, your daily podcast on the Vanderbilt Commodores. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Vandy podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Corey Burton, a former Rivals employee and a high school football coach. That's what I do. On today's episode, we're going to explore two home run candidates, Dusty May and Jerome Tang. Who would you rather have? Are they realistic? Either one of them is going to return that Memorial magic. We're going to tell you who here in a little bit. For Vandy football, Khordae Syndor will be the most impactful defensive newcomer, and I'll tell you why. And the Vandyboys are on an absolute heater. Can they continue the streak in Columbia, South Carolina? Who knows? Hopefully so. Thanks for making Locked On Vandy your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Well, take Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Check them all out today at nissanusa.com. So I was scrolling through the social media today, and I noticed I was tagged, or my show's account at Locked On Vandy on X was tagged by Billy Derrick of VanderbiltSports.com, and he brought up a really, really cool, interesting hypothetical. All right, and I think this is a very realistic hypothetical, but you have two possibilities. I talked about one here on Tuesday in Dusty May and what he brings to the table. And then the other one was Jerome Tang, who is currently the head coach at Kansas State. And I love both of these guys, right? But to me, if Jerome Tang, if you can get him, which I think it's realistic. You're helping with NIL. You're in Nashville. You're in the SEC, which is turning into a really good basketball conference. There's some factors there that would lead you to believe that Vandy actually has a chance at luring away Jerome Tang. So I think he would be the guy also that could say. There's a few guys that I think Vandy has a realistic shot at that could bring back Memorial magic, that could absolutely crush it here. Will Wade, Dusty May, Jerome Tang. Those are the guys I want to talk about. Those are the guys that come in, and I think you get instant game changers, right? Jerome Tang, before we get back into Dusty May, but Jerome Tang could be that guy. He will be that guy if you let him. He is that guy right now for Kansas State. So he was and here's why. Because, and the reason why I say Memorial Magic, right? Because what Tang has helped do at Kansas State, they have this thing called the Octagon of Doom, which I assume their arena is shaped like an octagon. If I had to guess, I don't know much about Kansas State's venues and where they play in Manhattan, Kansas, but they're now one of the toughest places to play in college basketball. They've played before 8 sellouts. They have a 15-1 home record with 5 wins over top 25 opponents, including number 2 Kansas, number 9 Baylor, number 17 TCU, and number 19 Iowa State, and number 24 West Virginia. These 15 wins were most nearly in a decade, tied for second most in the arena's 35-year history. 8 sellouts were the most since 2014-15, while the team was ranked 23rd nationally in percentage capacity at 87.57% in a newly configured 11,000-seat arena. Okay, all those stats are from kstatesports.com. So, like I said, Billy Derrick brought up this hypothetical, I was tagged in it, and I absolutely love it. So what I did was I didn't know a ton about Jerome Tang, and I dug in, and this guy's impressive, right? and he hasn't been at Kansas State very long. But last season they were 26. They won 26 games, and they made their 13th trip to the Elite Eight. That he did that in his first season. His second season is right now, and they are they're in the tournament right now. They are, let's see, Kansas State. I'm gonna tell you who they play. I haven't memorized the bracket because why would I? Because it's a lot of teams to memorize, a lot of games to memorize. But they play against. Well, they played in the NIT. They lost to Iowa, so they're done. So they're not in the tournament. So he is available, but they had a tough go this year. So they weren't great. But I think some of the things that he's done, some of the things he can do for Vanderbilt would be awesome. He is, they agreed to a new 7-year contract. So they gave him an extension. They had, when he came in his first season, like I said, they were 26-10 with just 2 returning players. That situation should sound familiar. They went to the Elite Eight, so they do have the capability of doing that. And the Wildcats set single season records with assists, finishing number 2 in points, field goals made, 3-point field goals made, free throw percentage, and steals. But what all that means is this, and this is why I think he would be great. What all of that means is that the brand of basketball they play is very intense, very, very, I guess, very much physical, in your face. Like, he wants to make things tough on the opponent. I think you shot selection, half court game, things like that. I think the way they play it, I think, sometimes you get these methodical guys that just want to slow the game down and whatnot. I think he's still very much like high pressure, but just from a half court, perspective. But this would be, like I said, I think he would come in. I think he'd be a really good culture guy. I think he would come in and immediately make things happen within the program. I think he would get guys on the same page, get guys communicating, and get them playing a tough brand of basketball, which is what Vandy sorely needs, because they weren't very tough with that. They weren't very tough down low, and they weren't very what's the word I'm looking for? They weren't very connected because they took bad shots. They were selfish, and it just didn't flow. And I don't think Stack adjusted very well. But Tang also spent time under Scott Drew at Baylor. He was very integral there with guys like Quincy Acey, Jared Butler, Fred Gillespie, Quincy Miller, those guys. I'm not going to name them all, but a bunch of NBA guys. Baylor's had all those really, really good years there. And he was associate head coach for many years before he moved on up to the Little Apple. So I think, despite the lack of success this year, I think it still would be a really, really good hire, because he has that potential, and he's the guy that's going to get the job done. Now, the other part of this, the other half of this hypothetical, who I still also believe would be outstanding, he has his team as an 8 seed this year in the NCAA tournament, Florida Atlantic. That's Dusty May. I talked about his merits on Tuesday's episode. So if you want to hear a full rundown of his merits, go look at Tuesday's episode. Go look at why he would be a home run hire too. So I think both of these guys would be good. So I'm gonna pose the question to you guys before we get out of this segment. Who would you rather have if you could choose between these two? All right. And I know people would be like, "Oh, Chris Mack. Chris Mack's not in the hypothetical. Oh, I'd rather have Will Wade." Well, Will Wade's not in the hypothetical. It's Dusty May or Jerome Tang. You have Dusty May, who understands NIL, who's, he has really good connectivity with his players, good atmosphere, things like that, knows how to win in the tournament, knows how to play in the tournament. You have Jerome Tang, who spent a lot of time at Baylor, understands the way the game that Baylor plays is very high flying, very physical, very much in your face. Very much we're gonna use the crowd against you, create really tough home environment, which is what Vandy needs in this league. They have a unique environment, so they need to be able to take advantage of that. So to me, I think, looking at Jerome Tang at first glance, I was like, oh, Dusty May all the way, right? Dusty May, 100%. But then I started looking into Jerome Tang, and I'm like, well, I don't know about that. So Jerome Tang, I think would be a home run too. I think he's the guy, and I fully believe this. The title of the show is Jerome Tang would help resurrect Memorial Magic for Vanderbilt men's basketball. I truly believe that. I think he would do that. He did that. He's done that at Kansas State, the Octagon of Doom, Memorial Magic. You have those catchphrases, right? He would do the same thing. So if you have a chance at him, he should be on the list. I don't know who's on the list. They haven't released the list, but I think he should be on it. I think he should be somebody that you go after. And I say that also because I think Dusty May is going to be something a lot of people are going after too. So you gotta act fast on these guys. So anyway, but Dusty May, Jerome Tang, I think those guys have got to be on the short list. I think you got to contact Will Wade as well at McNeese State. They're in the tournament too, so I think you got to contact him, make him say no, make Dusty May say no, or make Jerome Tang say no, and then go down to Chris Mack or Pat Kelsey. So there you go. That's my rundown there. So spring practice is off and running. Another practice is going to be in the books very, very soon, and then a practice on Saturday as well. Who's going to be the top defensive newcomer? Well, it's going to come from an interior guy for sure. We're going to talk about that next. All right, Nissan. This week's March Madness Bracket Highlights brought to you by our friends at Nissan. Each week, we're picking one team that stands out, a team that's pushed it further than the rest, just like any and all of the 2024 Nissan SUVs. These guys were able to take it to the next level. So the Yukon Huskies can only be described as an armada. This top-seeded team is as hardcore as it gets out there. So it's no wonder they've landed the top overall seed in the NCAA tournament. They are also the defending champions. They're one of the favorites to win it all, despite 4 of the 6 Power 6 conference champions are standing in their way in the East region. One of those teams is the Auburn Tigers, who can only be described as the Pathfinder. They've been thrilling to watch, and they've created a lane for themselves after claiming the top spot in the SEC. As they knocked off the Florida Gators in the SEC championship, they're set to make a run in the NCAA tournament. And then, of course, the Oregon Ducks are obviously the Nissan Rogue. This team absolutely surprised us all with a powerful performance in the Pac-12 tournament, punching their ticket to the big dance. They say, win life, go Rogue, and that's exactly what the Ducks have done here. So take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. And we are with FanDuel. You got it, man. FanDuel. It is your number one sports book. It is March Madness, guys. Go to FanDuel. I'm gonna tell you about this here. So say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney. Bet on all the underdogs. I'm going to bet on all the underdogs. So whether you're betting on a big upset or a one seed, it's time to go dancing on America's number one sports book. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines, and you can even pick who's going to win it all. That's a future. So just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. All right, welcome back. Segment number 2. We talked about a little bit about Dusty May versus Jerome Tang. That's a typo in the sidebar there. It should be Dusty May. Pardon me. I think Jerome Tang is a very interesting candidate. I think he's somebody that can bring a lot of a lot of good basketball here. The Baylor way, Kansas State's, tough season this year, but they played their butts off in his first season. He turned things around. So I think he'd be a very interesting, solid hire for Vanderbilt if they can make that happen. So there's a lot of good candidates out there that I think have a realistic chance of landing in Vanderbilt. And why? Because Vanderbilt is a great destination city. It's a great city to have NIL at your fingertips, which they're going to have. And I think it's it's one of those jobs where it's classified kind of as a sleeping giant. If they can get this hire right, Vanderbilt can be a place that's very, very dangerous in a really good basketball conference. Baseball has turned it around as well. They've used the transfer portal and NIL, so why can't basketball do it? Vandy didn't hire a new coach by any stretch, but they've turned some things around, and we'll talk about how they've done that. So, but let's turn our attention to football. That's right. Yeah, spring practice is kicked off. Practice number 2 should be in the books here pretty soon. And who's going to be the most impactful defensive newcomer? I think that's one of the big storylines in this spring, because there's a lot of new things on that side of the ball. You have Clark Lee taking over as defensive play caller. You have a bunch of transfers. And to be honest, I think it's going to be Khordae Syndor. And why is that going to be? Because Khordae Syndor is going to be the guy that can affect – he's an edge player. So he's like the defensive end / outside linebacker. Now, he has enough size to where if you needed to go like a 4-down nickel package, he could put his hand in the dirt and really cause some havoc as a defensive end, 5-technique defensive end. But if he stands up, he's also athletic enough, quick enough, fast enough, and seasoned enough to be able to get after the passer as well. So he can be solid in the run game. He can play to the boundary. He's good enough to play to the field, which I don't know if they're going to need him to or not. Depends on how they construct their calls and construct their strengths and things like that, and where they kind of put him versus the other edge guy. Because the other edge guy might be like more of like a hybrid linebacker safety type, kind of a star position, I guess. And then he's like more of a defensive end outside linebacker. So he's just powerful, man. And just his game, his style of play is somebody that I think when Clark Lee signed him, he knew exactly like what I love about what Clark Lee's done in the transfer portal. And he did this. I talked about how he did this on the offensive side of the ball with getting really good role players and guys that fit certain jobs and certain niches. I think he's done the same thing on defense. Like I think he's like, okay, we need somebody that has some size that can stop the run, but is also good enough to get to the passer. Well, Khordae Syndor did that for Purdue. He can do that absolutely for Vanderbilt. Coming off the edge, one of those guys that he's coming from the boundary. So like maybe if they go like formation to the field and the quarterback's not really looking at the boundary, and all of a sudden, boom, he gets a helmet under the chin, and it's Khordae Syndor doing his little I just sacked the quarterback dance after he gets a momentum changing sack. It's things like that I think that can affect the team, can affect momentum. Anytime you get those type of plays from your edge guys, it really kind of jacks things up. And you see it all over the place. You see it. Georgia won Georgia won 2 national championships, and the one they won in 21 was because they had elite edge play. It helped that Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter were on the interior too on that defense. That was probably one of the greatest defenses in college football history. But what that allowed is it opened things up for the edge guy. That's where they got the momentum. Like those guys played really, really well. Jalen Carter obviously did his thing, but it was the guys off the edge that I think really kind of played extremely well. And when you can get good pressure off the edge, it helps your coverage. When you can help your coverage, it helps those interior guys find their footing and really make a difference. When those interior guys play really well, they're plugging the run game. They're pushing the pocket a little bit, that are going to create opportunities for these defensive guys, these defensive edge guys to affect the quarterback. Because the quarterback can't step up into the pocket like he normally would because that pocket's collapsing on him. So he has to kind of bail. And when he bails right into one of those guys. And so it's going to be one of those situations where he's going to take advantage of, these defensive linemen are going to be moving, shifting. They're going to be blitzing, twisting, stunting. I think you're going to see a lot more. To me, I think you're going to see, based on what he did at Notre Dame, you're going to see probably a lot more movement, a lot more aggressiveness there, which is why he hasn't done that since he's been here as much or as frequently is beyond me, because situationally as Vanderbilt, that's the way you got to play. You got to play aggressively. You got to play with your hair on fire. But for him to now finally realize that, I guess better late than never, right? Now, if I'm using an idiom. So you have to understand that, as a defensive play caller, you have to understand, okay, how am I gonna get my edge guys to the quarterback? How am I going to get them to affect the perimeter run game? How am I going to get them to be disruptors? What can we do to get them involved? And I think having a piece like Khordae Syndor is somebody that can, really just kind of he's good enough and big enough to kind of disrupt the game plan in multiple ways is the reason why he's going to be the most impactful defensive newcomer. Now, there's a lot of guys that fit this category, but I think getting after the passer is your first level of defense. So that's why. That's why it's not one of the back end guys, because I think getting after the quarterback is going to be a very vital part of what they do defensively, and how to, I think that helps the back end guys more than the back end guys helping Syndor get to the quarterback. So it's exciting though, nonetheless, and it's a good hypothetical for sure. And so, that's kind of the way I see it. So the Vandyboys, go ahead and knock on some wood. They're on a heater. We'll talk about it. All right. Talking about Amazon Fire TV. I love the Fire TV channels thing. Amazon's absolutely crushing it here. And I love it because it's so easy to use, but it's also your destination for sports, from live games to highlights to in-depth analysis. Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as its Fire TV stick that you can plug into your existing TV that provides access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. Whether it's opening weekend for baseball or the college basketball tournament, you're going to want to have a Fire TV. Fire TV also has recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from all your favorite sports brands, all for free. That includes all of us at Locked On and most of the big pro leagues and college conferences as well. Fire TV channels let you dive into all of the game analysis, highlights, and more to keep up to date on the latest world of sports. March Madness, NBA, MLB, and lots more. Not to mention great news, entertainment, gaming, travel, cooking videos as well. So check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. Trust me on this. So learn more. Visit Amazon.com/Fire TV. It's right here below. Check them out. All right, wrapping this thing up here. Thank you for making Vandy your first listen each and every day. I want to thank the everydayers as well. Also, are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Do you have to turn down the volume with all of that shouting? So make the switch to Locked On Sports today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Who wants screaming? So Locked On Sports today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or for free on Amazon Fire TV channels app. As part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So the Vandyboys, break them up. That's my old saying, like break them up because they're on fire. They are absolutely on a heater, and I hope that I'm not jinxing that, which I very well could be. That's neither here nor there. So Vandy baseball is on an absolute tear right now. And this is the latest coming on a it was low scoring, but they beat Belmont 3-1. And so, to be exact, and I'm knocking on wood right now, they're on a 14 game win streak, right? And so they're ranked third in the country now, and rightfully so. They're outscoring opponents 128-53, so the Bats are on fire. And you add, so really after Tuesday's win, it is 131-54 is the scoring. So pitching has been good, great at times. The starting pitching has been outstanding for the most part. Baseball is never going to be perfect, but the relief pitching has been kind of all over the place, kind of up and down like a roller coaster. Really good one night, really bad the next. Or it could go inning to inning as well. So they haven't really played many close games. They swept Auburn. So like those are some of the things that you're looking at going, they accomplished all this. And we're hardly into the conference schedule. So I think when you look at this team, I think one of the reasons that they're playing so well is depth, because it's not the same guys every week. You have one night it'll be Matthew Polk or Jacob Humphrey in the speed guys with Calvin Hewitt and Matthew Polk and Jacob Humphrey. Some nights it'll be RJ Austin is an absolute stud, by the way. Another night it'll be Jonathan Vastine. Camden Kozel, who went on an absolute tear down in Texas at the Astros Classic. When he comes back into the lineup, I think he'll pick up right where he left off. Opening day, Bolger nails one into the seats on the very first pitch. You have Carter Holton absolutely dealing. Devin Futrell absolutely dealing. Bryce Cunningham. He's had some tough outings. They've all had some tough outings on the pitching staff, but for the most part, most of them have been dealing. The freshman pitchers have been absolutely outstanding. So it's just been the depth of it has allowed them to if RJ Austin and Jonathan Vastine are off one night, if they're not on point, the pitching will pick them up. Or let's say the outfielders are not hitting particularly well. Well, you'll have RJ Austin and Alan Espinal crush, raking. You have different guys are picking up the slack each night, which is important. A lot of teams don't have that. They have depth of pitching too. You lose a guy like Andrew Dukanich for a period of time. That'll hurt most bullpens. It has not hurt Vandy's, not yet at least. But that's the death, man. The Vastine's been absolutely crushing. I guess if you had to poke holes at something, defense, but that's just baseball, so I'm not really worried about that. Can they keep this pace? Well, the 14-game win streak, it's a lot of games to win in a row. They're gonna come back down to earth a little bit. What does that look like? As long as they're ready for regional and super regional play, that's all that matters. And in the grand scheme of things, play well enough to get you a good seed. So they'll certainly be tested. They'll be tested this weekend as well. They can absolutely win in South Carolina. The 3 weekend starters, I'd put them up against anybody in the conference. And one of the surprise teams in the conference is Georgia at 17-3. So that team is absolutely rolling after a really, I don't want to say abysmal year, because they've certainly had worse years, but they were very subpar with a talented roster at Georgia a year ago. Make a coaching change. Here you go. They're in the thick of it now in the conference. So, and then Vanderbilt is very much in the thick of it in the conference. They're the best team going right now. So it'll be fun to watch. They'll be, again, they're one of those teams that just, they hurt you in so many different ways. They can win a game 3-1, or they can win a game down 8-1 and come back and win 11-8. They can win a game where they just get off to a start and just crush you from the beginning and run rule you like they did Auburn on last Friday. So, but they're at South Carolina this coming weekend. That'll be a lot of fun. So this team is red hot. So anyway, But that's going to do it here. That's going to do it for us here on the Locked On Vandy podcast. What did we learn today? Well, we learned that Jerome Tang is actually a viable candidate and actually somebody they can really realistically get. It would be an absolute home run. Dusty May is somebody that they need to go after. Prevent him from going to Louisville. Khordae Syndor is going to be an absolute force coming off the edge, and the Vandyboys are on a freaking heater. That's what we learned. All right. So we're the Locked On Vandy podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network, hoping to be the biggest. Thank you, everydayers, for making all this possible. Without you, I would not have the same show. So for that, I'm Corey Burton. Thank you. We'll so long. See you later. See you back here tomorrow. We'll take you into the weekend. Happy March Madness Day. Hope your brackets do well. Anchor down. See you back here tomorrow. Peace.